Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam Study Circle. So, as per convention, we will discuss the Quran, we'll discuss Hadith, we'll discuss the Bible, and then we'll have a discussion on a topic. And finally, the study circle will conclude on some Q&As. So, starting off with the Quran, the verse that we are going to study today is something which is a known fact and something which is at the same time forgotten, also known to those who know the depth of this verse and unknown to those who have, uh, I would not say ignore it, but I would say that have overlooked some of its important implications. This is verse 38 of Surah Shura, which is the 42nd surah. It says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, and their system is based on their consultation. So basically, this is a verse which tells Muslims and the believers that as far as their system is concerned, and primarily the system of their governance is one in question, it should be based on their opinion. People who are part of their system should be the ones who would give their opinion, who should give their opinion. And an automatic corollary of this is that if there is any difference of opinion, the majority would prevail. So when it is said that a certain matter will be decided by the will of the people, by the opinion of the people, of course, it would mean that if they have a consensus on a particular issue, I mean, it's something which is already decided. But if there is a difference of opinion, then the majority will prevail. So the Quran here tells us that as far as collectivity is concerned, this should not be based in any way on coercion. It should not be based on a dictatorial rule. It should be based on the will of the people. And this will of the people, of course, can be found out in various times, in various ways. In the time of the Prophet, this will, or right after him, I would say, when the rightly guided caliphate came into existence, it was found out through tribal elders and people who were already in power. They remained in power as long as they enjoyed the confidence of the majority. So we know that the Quraysh was the ruling tribe in the times of the Prophet, and they were given the reins of rule right after him as per his own. He had also opined that as far as this principle is concerned, people might have any difficulty in implementing or understanding the implication of this principle. So in order to subvert any untoward situation that might arise after him, he had also said the famous words, Al-A'immatu min Quraysh, which means that after me, the rule should be transferred to the Quraysh. Not, of course, in any way this should not be in any way understood as a precept of Brahmanism or as a precept of some ruling class who was selected from a particular family. He was only portraying the situation that after him, the majority would be held by the Quraysh. And this is something that we also know, that when the Prophet was in Medina, he would often consult the Ansar and he would follow their view. But after the conquest of Mecca, when the whole of Arabia came under his rule, the situation changed, and the majority authority, or you can say the confidence of the majority, was enjoyed by the Muhajirun or the Quraysh, and that is precisely why the Prophet also said so. But primarily we have to understand that Amruhum Shura Bainahum is what he intended to implement, and in his own times, of course, he did so by pointing this out. So we have to understand that as far as other forms of government are concerned, for example, we know that we have dynasties. We have dynasties ruling in Islamic history. We had the Umayyads, we had the Abbasids, we had the Fatimids, we had the Idrisids, we had the Ottomans. All these were based on dynastic rule, and they all had dictatorial powers. And religion, Islam in particular, is absolutely against such autocratic setups. It says that people have to respect the authority of the majority. And so therefore, as far as dictatorship is concerned, this is something which is not called for. It is not in any way corroborated by religion or by what we know as Islam here. And as we can see from this verse, that it has to be the will of the majority. The right of the majority is that the will, as long as it prevails, it should be respected. And once this majority confidence is lost in a particular group or a particular party, as we say in these modern times, then they don't have any right to rule. In other words, what we can say is that the principle of governance, which is suggested by religion, suggested by the Quran, is in line with democracy. And since centuries ago, when People never thought that there should be any importance given to their own view. Islam laid this importance on their own view, and democracy as a polity, we know, it arose centuries later, and it is now that after so many centuries also that we still find that people at times they don't follow the spirit of this very important edict of the Quran. So it is this thing that we have to realize, that Islam does not corroborate any sort of dynasty. It does not even corroborate any sort of theocracy. So in our current times, we have theocratic governments in Iran, for example, in Afghanistan, and to some extent, I would say, in Saudi Arabia as well, although there is some treaty and some covenant between the scholars who rule there, who live there, and the ruling kingdom. But by and large, as far as Iran is concerned and as Afghanistan is concerned, both of these countries, they are ruled by theocracies. Theocracy means the rule of a religious group of people. So we know in Iran, the Shiites, they rule, and in Afghanistan, it's the Sunni government, which is spearheaded by the Taliban. So none of these is in, it would find its congruence in the Quran. And such is the importance of this particular directive of the Quran, that we have to rehearse and revisit this verse and discuss it more. And people should realize that as far as the Quran is concerned, it has given its verdict. And the Prophet himself also, when he gave this verdict that the Quraysh would rule after him, was actually defining these corners by saying that the Quraysh are the majority party after him, and they should rule as long as they enjoy the majority confidence. But we know after the fourth caliph, Ali Ta'ala Anhu, we have a great shift of this, and ultimately this shura, or this democracy, was turned into a kingdom, into a dynasty. And ever since the times of Amir Muawiyah, right up to in 1924, when the Ottoman Empire was annulled by Mustafa Kemal, we know that this was a dynastic rule all through. So now let's move on to our next topic, which is Hadith, and we will study Hadith from Abdullah ibn, this is from Abdullah ibn Umar, and has been recorded by Bukhari. So the words are, an Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhum, قال أخذ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بمنكبي فقال كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر السبيل. So Abdullah ibn Umar said that God's messenger held me by my shoulder and said, live in this world as a stranger or as a traveler. So these are beautiful words. These are words which have a deep impact when we study them. We know the prophetic words, the way they are, the way you can see them here. We find them in several narratives in which they are very precise, very concise, and they give a principal statement in such a simple, I would say, they are couched in so simple words, and they describe such profound realities in these simple words that one is amazed. And here, of course, the transient nature of this world, is what is being pointed out. That because this world is not a permanent place, it is something that is going to one day just vanish. People are going to disappear from here, and either will die, of course, or on the day of judgment, just before the day of judgment, when the day of judgment arrives, this world will be put into an end, and then people will be made to rise once again from their graves, and their accounts will be settled, and they will be dealt with according to their deeds. So this gives us this very important guidance that, yes, we have to live in this world by giving the best contribution that we can to our surroundings, to wherever we are, but at the same time, we must also realize that this world is a temporary world. And just as a traveler, he does not make any place that he is traveling, his destination, to be his permanent place. In a similar way, the Prophet has compared us in this world as if we are travelers. And the second comparison that he has done is that kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib, that you remain in this world as if you are a stranger. Again, the stress here is that if you would know the reality of this world, that it's a transient world, it's a temporary world, you will not make it a permanent residence. You will always be a person who is traveling. You will always be, you always regard yourself to be alien or strange, because if you go into the depths of the joys of this world, you will not at all find it comfortable being a stranger, or regarding the pleasures of this life to be transient and temporary. So basically, this transience and this temporary nature of this world is something that we always need to keep in our mind. And this is something that we often tend to forget. And at the same time, you can see that how often the Almighty reminds us of this great reality, this ultimate reality, this indisputable reality. And how does He remind us? He reminds us when we sleep every day and we get up in the morning. So when we sleep, we just lose senses. We just don't know where we are. And suddenly, when we get up in the morning, we realize that we had slept at night. And the whole process might have taken 6, 7, or 8 hours, but we don't realize that so much time had elapsed. So this is like a rehearsal of life and death being given to us every single day. So we, in a metaphorical sense, we die every day and we rise every day. We are born every day in the morning, which actually tells us that how the Almighty is making this life cycle a reminder for all of us to realize that as far as this world is concerned, it is something that is going to go away. It has a temporary existence. And at the same time, because at times the stress is not properly understood in the light of the Quran, this might lead a person to forsake this world, which is, of course, not implied here. The Prophet is not telling us to just disregard this world and just live as a person who has no connection with this world. This would not be the right interpretation of this narrative. The narrative actually tells us that you have to, I mean, if you look at the whole structure of religion, that you have to contribute, you have to live in this world. You just cannot forsake this world. You cannot be an ascetic. You cannot be a person who just thinks that he needs to just spend his time in worship rituals and just forget about what's going on in this life. That is not what the Prophet had intended. If you look at his narrative in the light of the Quran, he was actually trying to remind us that whilst living in this world, whilst contributing your best in this world, don't forget that you should not make this life your destination. You should not make it a permanent place, because this is something which we all know, because we see death every day. We see people dying. We see them dying individually. We see them dying collectively in various calamities. And death puts an end, a sudden end, to the lives of people. And death is not something which only comes to old people. It comes to everyone. It can come to everyone at any time, at any place. So we have to be on guard about that. But at the same time, it is a great gift of the Almighty that we tend to forget the time of death. I mean, if we were to remember this every single instant, we would have been miserable. So this is like an automatic relief that we are given, that we tend to be in this world, we work in this world, we have our own choices to make, we have our own decisions that we take, we lead a life according to our own choices. But then the thing is that we have to realize that this is a place which is not going to be permanent. It's like a flower which springs forth in the spring season, and then all that blossoming and the blooming of that flower slowly deteriorates and it withers away. So just as the flowers of this world wither away, we are also destined to wither away. So now let's go on to the next part, which is we study a Bible verse. And this verse has been actually taken from the Psalms. Psalms, we know, is a book which was revealed to the prophet David, and it is in the form of hymns of the Almighty. So this is Psalm 27, verse 1. It says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Who is then a cause of fear to me? The Lord is the strength of my life. Who is a danger to me?" So once again, we are faced with this scenario that we need to understand that our permanent relationship in this world, if it has to be permanent, can only be with a single being, that is God. All other relationships, although cherished, although needed, although depended upon, they are temporary. The nearest of our relations, our spouse, our parents, our children, our siblings, they will never be eternal. They will go away one day. But the only eternal relationship that we can have, the only eternal support that we can have, is the support of God. So that is why the prophet David has said this in a very, very sublime way, that the Lord is my light and my salvation. So he's my guidance. Light is basically the lamp which provides that light so that I can walk in the guidance of that light. If there was no light, it would be darkness. It would be desolate, dreary, dull darkness. And as a result, I would not be able to walk in that darkness. I would be stumbling at every single step that I would take. But that light tells me where to go. It divinely guides me. It has a spiritual impact on me. And I am able to find my way. And if I am able to find my way, then the very next words of this verse make a lot of sense, because it says, "The Lord is my light and He's my salvation." He is someone who is going to salvage me in the hereafter. If I follow the light that He has given me, if I walk in that light, the shadow of that light, the brightness of that light, of course, something that's going to lead me in the right direction, which will earn me salvation in the hereafter. So this is what God intends, that yes, He has given us intellect, He has given us common sense, He has given us the awareness of good and evil. These are all inborn faculties. But there are certain areas in which we need guidance, and the faculties that we have, they fall short. For example, how to worship the Almighty. What is the nature of our relationship with the Almighty? This is something which our own intellect, our own common sense, our own inner person cannot detect. And we see how extremities have developed in history. If you look at the past, that when people deprived themselves of divine guidance, they went to extremes in connecting with the Almighty. So we need this guidance from the Almighty. This is one area. Of course, there are several other areas in which intellect needs God's guidance. But one of the areas is, for example, God connection. That to what extent and in what manner and in what way do we need to connect to God? And then the next part of the verse is, "Who is then a cause of fear to me?" This again is such a beautiful verse, part of the verse, which tells us that if I connect myself to God, if God is there for me, if my only support is God, then I have no one to spare. I have no cause to fear, because He is the ultimate. He is the creator. If I am connected to Him, all others who are subservient to Him cannot harm me if He wishes to protect me. So I give myself into God's protection. And this is something which gives me immense satisfaction, that I am connected to my Creator is looking after me. And if there ever is some mishap, then it is because that He has wanted, or He would like to test me and try me regarding my attitude. But primarily, I am in God's protection. I have no one to fear, because I would have feared other people had I not been under God's protection, or my concept about God would be of the nature that I would regard Him to be dependent, for example, on other people for whom I would need their intercession towards Him. But this is not the case for a person who believes in God as a monotheist. He depends on God regarding every single thing that he would have in life. And finally, the next part of the verse says, "The Lord is the strength of my life." Now, this is something that we all experience, that yes, God Almighty is someone who is our rock, who is a pillar of our support. All other supports are temporary, they go away, and also they are not always there, even if they are living. They could be far away from you, they could be not in touch with you, but God is someone, as we know from the Quran also, that He is nearer to you than your life way. Every human being is experiencing God in some way or the other. So experiencing God is someone which lets us and tells us that we are being looked after. We are being taken care of. He is our strength. He has created this world in a manner in which He directly or indirectly has made a system in which someone is looking after us, our parents, our extended family. And for that matter, look at the elements of nature: the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the lakes, the clouds, the rain. All of this, what is the objective of all of this? So we know from the Quran, and we know from our own observation as well, that primarily it is to nurture and nourish mankind and other living forms. So if we understand that God is supporting us directly or indirectly, we would understand that He is the strength of our life. We can really be dependent on Him. And this leads to the last part of the verse, which says, "Who is a danger to me? Who can threaten me? Who can make me realize that I am in danger? Because I know that I am under God's protection." And to be under God's protection is such a big relief. It is like consigning ourselves to the best possible prescription of protection. He who is the ultimate, He who is the creator, He who has created everyone, He who has allowed people to do whatever they want to, He is someone who's going to look after us. And if that looking after requires that we be tried and tested in various forms, then that also is primarily to strengthen us from inside. So the trials which come to us, the tribulations that we go through, all are meant to strengthen us, to make us uh, stronger than before, to bring us even more in contact with the Almighty, to make us realize that it's easy to thank God when the going is easy, but the real mettle of a person is tested when he thanks God even in difficult times. So you can see how beautifully Prophet David has uttered these words, these sublime words. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Who is then a cause of fear to me? The Lord is the strength of my life. Who is a danger to me? So, viewers, now we come to the fourth segment of our study circle, which is primarily a discussion, moderated session. And we will ask our moderator, Mariam, to please commence this topic. And as you can see, its title is Winning Over Our Enemies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. If you could please expand on what exactly constitutes an enemy. Is it a more general thing or a more personalized?
So it's like people who are your rivals, people who would not want you to succeed in life, people who might be jealous of you, people who might like to undermine you. I mean, they are after you because at times you succeed in life in a far better way, in a far pronounced way, that they would like you to, I mean, somehow fail, because it's like that evil sentiment of jealousy taking the best of them. So people generally become our rivals either because of these emotions, or of course the rivalry can be, it could be because of some other reason. Maybe we have said something which has hurt them and we don't realize that. Maybe our own parents have started off that rivalry, maybe in the past as well, and that is still continuing. And we need to dish out what exactly is the matter and why is it that certain people are behaving irrationally or as if they are foes, even when the nature and the situation is such that they are maybe family members and they should not behave as foes. So it is like a general thing that you experience from your surroundings, in which you find that there are people who are angry with you, annoyed with you. Maybe they have a reason and maybe they don't have a reason.
Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Saleem. For the participants, if you would like to participate in the discussion, which would be very nice, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts, please raise your hand or you can type your thoughts in the chat. I'll start off with giving off my 2 cents. So this might be a more naive outlook, but what I find is that people who wish bad for you just for the sake of wishing bad, not that they actually have a reason.
Mhm.
First and foremost, as a good person, you should make sure that you're not hurting anyone. But if you've done something un, you know,
Mhm.
unconsciously to hurt someone, making sure that you present yourself in such a way that people have an easier time connecting with you and opening up to you in case they have problems with you or they'd like to correct you in some way, you keep that line open. But if there is someone in your life who just genuinely wants to see you fail or wants to get you in trouble, with those people, I think it's best to not bother with them. So trying to maintain your professionalism, for example, if it's in a workplace,
Mhm.
is going to be key to helping you succeed. And everyone around that person and you will know that
Mhm.
at least you're trying your best, and they know about your personality because you've always been presenting yourself that way. So
Mhm.
essentially, if you maintain a account like genuinely a kind outlook with people and like treat them well, the majority of the people will know your personality. And so if somebody really tries to bring you down or like take a slight at your character,
Mhm.
they'll have a hard time, succeeding with that.
So actually, the measure that you have suggested, or rather, are the ones in which you would not like them to succeed in their evil intent. So there is one step ahead, or one step forward, because we using this expression winning over our enemies, or turning our foes into friends, so to speak. So you see, for this, you need to be a little more magnanimous. For example, when you find someone who has been bad to you, if he's discussed somewhere or she's discussed somewhere, and that particular person is being wrongly discussed, or there's something which is being erroneously spread about that person, and you know for sure that he is not that kind or she is not that kind, then to put in a word, your own word, which says, no, he is or she is not that sort of a person. We have this misinformation. So this is something that you are doing in defending them. And the point that we are making here is that if someone is evil to you or someone is bad to you, your response in order to win that person over should be to be more than good to that person. For example, to talk to that person if there is any situation in which you have to talk to him or her in a way that you are not put off, you're not disgruntled, you're not angry or annoyed because someone has really harmed you or done bad to you. You talk to that person in a very kind and a compassionate way. You give the person that look in which that person feels welcome. Maybe you can even give that person a gift or some present whenever there is an occasion of that sort. Similarly, as I said, defending that person in his or her absence, in that because news is bound to reach that person as well, that you were there to put in a word on your own behalf for his or her right character. So I think the thing that we need to understand here is it's like a package, that if you are being persecuted, if you are being done, you're being treated badly, then yes, it is very natural to be bogged down. It is very natural to get frustrated and even angry. But the antidote to this is not that you start avoiding that person or not letting that person succeed. Yes, that to one level is something that is fair enough, because we have been allowed in the Quran to take exact revenge of what we ourselves suffered. But there is one step ahead, which the Quran also says, that if you forgive that person's harm that he has caused or she's caused you, and you turn that bad or ugly situation in such a manner that you find or you give that person your own compassion, your own sympathy, your own kindness, so that you are able to conquer that person's heart. And of course, for that, you can, as I suggested just a few things, but this is what the Quran wants us to do. That it's easy to be. You can sideline people, you can ignore them, because you have the right to in the first place. You have the right to exact equal revenge. If a person behaves badly with you, okay, fine, you can do that in equal measure. But the Quran has told us that in order to win that person, in order to make that person realize, one thing is to criticize him, one thing is to tell him off. Yes, that is something that you might do occasionally, or if the occasion is such. But another thing is to win the person's heart.
Thank you very much for Dr. Saleem. Sometimes you would find that some people, no matter what you try, you just cannot win their heart.
Right.
They're like hell bent on
Right.
making your
Yeah.
life, on other
Yeah.
people's lives miserable.
I understand. So these are incorrigible people. You just cannot do that. But you see, this is a test of our own patience, because you never know when that person is going to change. Because if he hasn't changed in 3 or 5 years or 10 years, it's always a chance. There's always a chance that he or she would. So I think what we need to understand is that we should not get frustrated or disappointed if our good behavior is not changing that person, because this is what we should keep on doing, unless, of course, the other person is trying to harm you so much that he's maybe after your life, or maybe something which is threatening your peace. So that could be a reason for your whole withdrawal. But in normal circumstances, a person who is a true believer, he or she is always on the lookout. He or she has that positive inclination, which is found in abundance, that if something has not happened until now, so what? Maybe it can in the future. So to remain positive, to remain to have that hope, and to hope against hope, that is what actually at times wins us God's help also. You see, this nusrat, which is called nusratullah, which is God's help in Arabic, is something which comes to us because of our perseverance and persistence. We think that it's the end of the road. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. Darkness is everywhere. But this is something what we humanly think. For God, it's not. I mean, He can go away that darkness anytime. So if we are able to persist, at times that persistence is rewarded by God through some miraculous opening that we have not foreseen.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Shabana Ansari, please go ahead.
मेरे ख्याल में सब्र, माफी और मुस्बत सोच अगर हम अपनाते हैं तो ये काफी सालों में भी दुश्मन जो है वो दोस्त बन जाता है, और अगर नहीं भी बनता तो हमें जो है वो अपने अखलाकी उसूल जो अल्लाह ताला ने सिखाए और नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने प्रैक्टिस करके बताएं, तो उनको किसी भी हाल में उनको नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए और उस पे कायम रहना चाहिए, क्योंकि हमारा मामला जो है वो अल्लाह के साथ है, इंसानों के साथ नहीं। तो उससे ये है कि इंसान को खुद को बहुत तसल्ली रहती है। दूसरा जो है वो जो कुछ भी करे, आपका मामला क्योंकि अल्लाह के साथ है, तो फिर दिल मुतमईन रहता है। मेरा ये ख्याल है।
Thank you very much. It's a very good guidance that you have given us, that patience and forgiveness, sabr, maafi, and what was the third thing that you said?
मुस्बत मतलब पॉजिटिव रहना।
So positivity. So positivity is the third thing that you mentioned, that you should be patient, you should be forgiving, and you should always be positive. Forgiveness is something which has not come easy, but if you are connected to God, forgiveness becomes easy. Patience also does not come easy. But as the Quran has also said, "Wama sabruka illa billah," that you can only be patient if you are connected with God, because you are relying on God. You have consigned your matter to God, so you become more patient. And positivity is something, of course, is the hallmark of every believer, or should be the hallmark of every believer, because he or she intends that people should change for the better. It is the person's sincerity, and that sincerity is found in the person so much that he or she is always on the lookout at what if, doesn't matter if they have not changed until now, maybe in the future they will. So this positivity, this forgiveness, this compassion, and this sympathy is something that should work its magic, I would say. Thank you for that, Shabana.
Thank you. Ruhi Rasul, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, I will talk about my personal experience here. That I've had 3 enemies in my life. Not more than that. And they were the people who had very strong ego problems, and somehow they thought that I was probably a simple person, and I was confident, or perhaps they found me overconfident in a wrong manner, or they disliked it. And I had very serious episodes with them. I was hurt deeply by all 3 of them. But in the first case, it was a remote family member. And although I loved her so much, being very close to her and learning a lot from her, I thought that she was my sort of a mentor, and I have learned so many nice things from her. But gradually, what I felt was that the things from the other side were not like that. And she spread very harsh things about me, wrong things about me in the family. And I was deeply hurt by that. I had to explain every part of it. But in the second case, it was my teacher, a male teacher, who managed somehow. I don't know why he did all that, although I had always deeply respected my teachers from the very childhood, and take them like my father, like my elder brother, and try to learn a lot from them, whatever I could. but somehow he developed some sort of a, I don't know what he thought of me, and he managed to throw me out of the class. Um, I don't know how I uh, sort of developed that disliking in his heart for myself, that I had to run away for my sort of life. I fell uh, ill after that, seriously ill,
Okay.
and I had to undergo a
So
deep.
if I can a little interject here, I mean these episodes I understand you can have with your rivals, but would you like to share more about how you countered them, or I mean how you
Yes,
changed your attitude?
in the first case, sir, although since she was my relative, I distanced myself from her. I kept talking to her. I kept discussing and going to her place and being very normal in every case. But in other cases where she wanted to come closer to me, I would just keep myself out of reach for her. And this thing is still going on, and we are not closer anymore, but of course as relatives we are okay with each other. And in the second case, I told you that I kept talking to the teacher for some time, but then I told him that what you have done to me, and I didn't deserve that. And he didn't explain it at all to me, that why he developed such ill feelings about me. He never did that. And for the third time, what was that I went to the senior management, and I complained about that lady, that she was disturbing all the system
So
that I had
again,
developed.
I would say that the examples that you are giving here are not of examples in which you are winning over your enemies. All that you are have said, I mean, I do realize your ordeal. I do realize you must have gone through a tough time. But all these examples relate to distancing yourself from from your rival and maybe creating that barrier. So our concern here at the moment here, I mean, we're talking about winning the hearts of our enemies is something which is more pronounced than what we have described, I would say.
Sir, in the first case where I had distanced myself from my relative, we have developed good relations once again with each other, although we don't exchange um, very deep kind of feelings with each other, but otherwise
Hmm.
we are okay with each other. So I think that I have, in a way, cleared that situation. But in the other two cases, in the last case, that lady eventually became one of my friends, and she appreciated my guts, that I had, that she was convinced whatever I was doing about that.
Okay,
But as far
thank you.
as that male teacher is concerned, there is I couldn't win out
I I understand.
his. Ji.
I understand. Okay, thank you for sharing these events.
Thank you, Ruhi.
Thank you,
Ikra
sir.
Bashir, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, I think this situation arises when people start comparing their situation with others without considering their efforts or the battles they have fought, and in that comparison, they start developing negative thoughts. This is my perception about this topic. Now, I will share my experience and what I have done to deal with them. There are some relationships in my life who have pre-perceived or pre-established thoughts about me. So I tried to lead it in a good way. So whenever I met with them, I try to be kind and I try to exchange gifts sometimes, but the coldness is continued in the long run. It don't change. And then sometimes I think maybe I should also keep quiet and maintain distance. But then it comes to my mind after some time about Sila Rahmi, not to cut with the relationships because they are kind of close relationships. So when I think about it, the positive feelings, and again I try to contact or forgive, be kind, step forward, but the other person take it for granted and start thinking like, see, I was right, she was wrong, so maybe she is trying to be considerate again. So this step again becomes against me. So I don't know. Should I
Right.
be quiet and distance or?
So you see, one more thing that we have to understand here is that our rivals or our foes could also be right. For example, we might be providing them with the right, they would be justified in being angry with us. What I'm trying to say is that at times people who are angry with us, people who are behaving as rivals, we don't tend to understand where they are coming from. And there are occasions in which we might be at fault, and that person, instead of maybe communicating our fault to us in a way that we are able to understand what's going on, instead of doing that, what that person does is he or she becomes angry or reacts in a way that offends us. So I think one important thing, or one important point here, is that whenever you have a rival, a critic, a person who is not happy with you, it's time for introspection as well. And that is that maybe I am also wrong. Maybe I am giving that person the reason to be angry. Maybe I am doing something which is angering that person. So I think that at times we have to, in fact, if you allow me to say, I would say this is the first step that we should take. That when we think that there are people who are our rivals, yes, there are some very obvious rivals, and we know that the reason for that rivalry could be very apparent. For example, success in our case, or some other reason. But one thing that we always need to, as I said, consider is that we might be wrong as well. And we might be providing the person the perfect justification to act as our rival. So this calls for that introspection. This calls for, of course, another thing also, and that is that if there's someone who's criticizing you, or he's being or she's being angry with you, forget about that harshness in the tone or in the words that he or she is choosing. Look at the content. Maybe the content that you are coming across from that person is something that should stir something in your mind, make you realize, or make us realize that, well, yes, although the words are not appropriate, but what that person is saying is true. So I think this is another very important thing which has to be done, and this is part of the empathy or the empathetic personality that all of us would like to build in ourselves, that we would like to study the other person's behavior and relationships as if we are in that person's place.
I agree with you. I always try to see the other side of the picture, that if I would be there, so then what? So this is the reason I try to take it. But if I try to be open, like in-laws, relationships, in-laws, it's always very difficult to manage. They have their
Right.
some own pre-perceived
See,
thoughts.
another important thing is that there are certain truths, and not every truth or not every fact is meant to be discussed everywhere. I mean, there are things that you just need to carry with your own self. So you see, you have to pick and choose your audience. You have to pick and choose your words. You have to pick and choose what to say and to whom to say, and if the appropriate situation has arisen for you to say. So this is part of your own personality and your own empathetic quotient, I would say, in which you realize that now you're in a situation in which your relations, for example, your in-laws or even your own siblings, your blood relations, they are in a way not understanding your personality, and there is some barrier. So I think for that we have to step back and try to first remove that barrier, because you see that barrier creates a communication gap. And that communication gap, when it develops, it gives the wrong impression. I mean, you're using the right words, but they are being perceived in a different way by your listener. So you see, perception is also something which you have to understand at times arises because we are not using or choosing the appropriate words. So see, it's so important that at times the same word to us would have a particular meaning, but as soon as it gets across to the other person, he or she takes it in a different way. So all these, all these also relate to another very important thing, and that is communication skills. So as individuals, all of us, if we have to maintain healthy relations with our family, with our near ones, with our colleagues, at our workplaces, we have to have that communication, the art of communication. We have to learn that art of communication in which we get to know where to speak, and what not to speak. And in spite of things being true or the truth being spoken, it's not. It's not always mandatory to speak the truth at wrong instances. At times, you need to just stay silent. So silence itself is a big teacher. All these things, as I said, relate to the skills of communication, and they need a separate discussion. We will do it sometime, inshallah. But then, as I said, this is like a package that comes to all of us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the raised hands for the discussion. So, if you have any more points to add, otherwise we can move on to the Q&A.
Yes, we can move on, I think.
Thank you. So the first question asks, when we talk about obeying the laws of the land, would this be an obligation as long as it doesn't contradict the Sharia? And to what extent of the laws does this consist of?
Well, this is basically a hypothetical question, and hypothetical questions are best answered by answering it in a way which points to the principle. And the principle is, it all depends what you actually think of the Sharia. For example, in my experience, I have seen so many non-Muslim countries in which there is not a single, it's hard to point out a single law which is against the Sharia, in the sense that they are not making us, they are not imposing something on us which is against our own will. Yes, there are certain laws, but I would give you some example. In France, for example, the hijab issue is a big issue. It still is a big issue after about 6 or 7 years of discussion. They still have that hijab ban. So women who think that hijab is a directive of the religion and they need to cover their heads or their faces, like the niqab, so if they are forced, for example, to undo that or not wear that, so they have two choices. One of the choices is that they present their viewpoint and tell them that this is religiously binding on them and they are not in a position to disobey that. So as a pressure group, they would like themselves to be heard. This is of course the first step. Secondly, of course, the outcome of this would either be that they are heard and they are given that benefit, or they're given that opportunity, or, for example, after hearing them out, a law is passed which is against what they think is the call of their religion. So they have two choices now. Either they continue with the same in the same way, which would mean that they would of course be arrested or fined or not be given jobs. Or the third option is that you just migrate from that place or just move away from that place, which of course I know is not an easy job at all. But then you see, it all depends how much you give weight to some commandments of your faith. And the third way out is that under compulsion, if you think that it is so important, I have a different view in this regard, but there could be different views as well. So if there are women who think that not covering their heads is a big anathema, is a big sin, and they also have no place to migrate, and they are also forced to do something, then under compulsion, if they don't do so, of course, if they don't cover their heads, then my understanding of the Quran is that God will not hold them to account, because for this they had no, they were not, it was not possible for them to do so. They would have gone through this thing, they would have either been arrested or fined or been deported. So in the absence of that, the only option they could have had was to just, follow that under compulsion and keep on raising their voices against it, that, well, we are doing something which is against our conscience, against our religion, but we would like to make a point that this is something that is a basic human right, and we would like us to be heard and given that opportunity. So I'm just, as I said, because it's a hypothetical question, I have confined myself partly to hypothesis and partly to this situation in which you have a real-time issue in which women might think that they are being forced to go against their religion.
Thank you very much for that example, Dr. Saleem, and clarification. The next question asks, how to balance between enemies and competitors?
I think, as the word itself says, competitors or competition is healthy. I mean, it's like a positive thing. You're not trying to score against your competitors. Yes, it's basically a positive thing that if there's a competition, then instead of making the other person feel or adopting ways in which that person is not able to succeed, you get that urge that I'm going to perform even better. I'm going to outdo that person. So competition, my understanding of competition is that it's a healthy competition. So basically is one in which you try to excel. When you see that the other person is rising, you say, okay, I'll take a step ahead. And when that person rises even more, you say, okay, I'll go even higher. Not in any way negatively, not by downplaying that person, but by making your own product maybe even more better than before. But the other thing, the other word which is often used in this regard is unhealthy competition, which is the opposite. Of course, that is something in which you are employing all sorts of tactics, good and bad. It's by hook or by crook that you would like yourself to become superior to the other person. And I think that is something that we should avoid.
Thank you for that distinction, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, if we're going through a test with complete free will and all of our actions are results of our choices, then why should we show gratitude and give credit to God for the choices and actions we make?
Because we don't know. I mean, this is our assumption that all the things that we are doing are because of our actions. We don't know that the variables are so many. I mean, it's that success story is something which does not make us realize that success hinged upon so many variables, so many things that were not in our control, but they all came together so that we could succeed. I mean, there was no fire that erupted in our building, so to speak. There was no rain that caused floods and destroyed, let's say, our assets, and we could have just been wasted away. So you see, it's like the circumstances are such that, like your own effort, I mean, besides your own effort, whatever you're doing, the external environment has become conducive to make you succeed. And that external environment is again controlled by so many factors and so many factors that you ultimately realize that it's a huge machine in which the cogs and the wheels are all running into one another. And if one thing had happened, that particular cog had not gone to the wheel, everything would have gone the reverse. So you see, that is something which is in the hands of God, and that is why we need to thank Him. And of course, needless to say that a lot of things that we have are things that we don't actually deserve. For example, my own skill set is something that is bestowed on me from God. So if I am using that skill set to create success for myself, then I am not the author of my skill set. I am a recipient of my skill set. Similarly, if I have money and resources, in many cases, this money and resources are inherited by us from our parents. So it's they who provide that base and foundation, and we are able to build upon that. So I think that again, it's a hypothetical question, but there are situations. If the person would like to ask, I can tell them that in every particular situation, you will find the hand of God. It's just a question of thinking deep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, if we feel that we are affected by evil eye and we believe that God is our protector and nothing can harm us until He wills it, then what is there for us to do? Should we do something about it, or should we just sit around and do nothing?
So basically, if this happens, first of all, we need to establish that this has happened, and that is that we must rule out all other physical ailments. So you see, what normally happens is that when something goes wrong, for example, if you start having illnesses and ailments one after the other, when you suffer losses in your business, when something bad happens, instead of analyzing the cause, we immediately think that, well, this is the question of an evil eye. I'm not ruling that out. I'm going to come to that. But you see, the first thing that you must analyze whenever you suffer in any form is to analyze the reason. And on many occasions, you might find the loss that you are suffering. It could be your health loss. It could be some financial loss. That there is an external reason, maybe something you had done wrong. maybe you did not take enough precautions and you became sick, and you're continuing to become sick because of your lack of immunity, or there could be several other reasons. But having said that, if all reasoning has been exhausted and still you're not being able to detect something that is going wrong in your life, and you're not being able to detect, yes, there's a possibility of an evil eye, then in that case, what we can know, or what we do know from the Quran and from Hadith literature, is that we should give ourselves in the protection of the Almighty by reciting the last two surahs of the Quran, which actually have these words that, oh God, I give myself in your protection. And if even after reciting those verses, you still are not protected the way you would like to be protected, and God does not cure that thing, then you have to understand that it is like a trial and test from God. So yes, it's a trial, because you see, on such occasions we lose our faith, we become superstitious, we might go to a peer, we might go to some saint and try to do things which bring us which take us away from God and make us enter the realms of polytheism. So you see, this is a very tricky situation, it's a very precarious situation. So when God does not answer your calls in such a situation, at times he wants to test your faith, whether you have that strong faith that you will still stick to him and not go to some other person. So that's one thing that we have to realize, that in spite of consigning ourselves in his protection, there is no guarantee that you'll get that protection. I mean, yes, normally God would give you that protection, but sometimes to test you, to try you, to see how good a person you are, and how, I mean, you made the claims that I'm a person who believes in God, but whether you really believe in God is something that is really tested in such precarious situations. So this is done by him, and he puts us through these bothers and botherations for our own betterment, as I said. And that betterment, of course, is that principle of trial is something which intends to make us even better than before.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Shaban Ansari, please go ahead.
मेरा सूरह बकरा से मुतालिक सवाल है, वो कर सकती हूँ मैं? पिछली मर्तबा रह गया था।
Yes, please go ahead.
आपने बताया था उसमें असा अन तुहिब्बु शैअन व हुवा करहुल लकुम, और ये था कि असान तकरहु शैअन व हुवा खैरुल लकुम। तो उसमें आपने कहा था कि ये हम मतलब आम जनरली भी ये अप्लाई हो सकता है। तो ये बताएं कि मुझे इससे ये पूछना था कि जनरली आमतौर पे सबकी जिंदगी में बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें होती हैं जो उन्हें पसंद नहीं होती, लेकिन वो उसको बदल भी नहीं सकते। तो मेरा ख्याल है कि तकदीर से मुतालिक चीजें भी कुछ ऐसी होती है ना कि जिसमें एक तो मैदान खुला है जो हम कर सकते हैं और जिसको हम चेंज नहीं कर सकते। उसके बारे में थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन कर दें कि कौन सी चीजें हम नहीं चेंज कर सकते और कौन से में हम जो हम कर सकते हैं, वो अगर आप
You see, this verse refers to things that are beyond our control. I mean, some things which happen beyond our expectations or against our expectations. And as far as our own fate is concerned, there are certain things, of course, that cannot be changed. We cannot change our origin, we cannot change our country, we cannot change our color, we cannot change our body appearance. So there are things which are ordained by God. So this verse does not apply to those to this scenario. It applies to events that happen in life which we would not like to have happened. We would have thought that, well, maybe they should have happened in a different way. And we realize that, well, at that time we might feel that they are not, I mean, they have caused a lot of bother for us. But when we move ahead in life and we look behind, like in hindsight, we realize that, well, yes, if they didn't happen the way we would have intended them to happen, it was better for us. So you see, it is basically these events which happen in which we have expectations that, well, this is how things should go on in life, but they don't go in that pattern. So these are events that take place in your life. They don't relate to your own persona, for example, the way you are, because that is something that cannot be changed. And this verse does not relate to that. Remember, the context of this verse is qital. These hypocrites, they were claiming that, well, yes, we would fight and do everything to support. But once the directive came, they backed out and they said, well, how can we just sacrifice our lives? So on this instance, this verse told them that, well, you might dislike something wherever your own betterment is concealed in what you dislike. So basically, this verse relates to events which happen in our lives, which we might not like to have them happened.
और उसमें जैसे हम उन इवेंट्स में हम आमतौर पे सोचते हैं कि अगर हमने ये कर लिया होता तो ऐसा ना होता, तो ये भी चीज उसमें आ जाती है.
Right, correct. So it goes both ways. So at times you like something whereas it was not good for you. And at other times, you don't like something. You would have liked that thing not to happen, but you don't realize that ultimately it sounded something which went in your favor.
और फ्यूचर में जाके फिर पता चलती है कि उससे हमें क्या-क्या फायदे हुए।
I think this is
सही है।
something that all of us have seen in our lives, that there are so many things that we would have wanted to have been done in a certain point of time, but when we moved ahead and we actually ended up thanking God, that thank God it didn't go the way that we wanted it to go, because that would have caused us a lot of bother. I think this hindsight is something which builds that faith in God, that if something didn't happen the way we wanted it to happen, and later on we realized that it was the right course of action, so we immediately thank God, that thank God, God, you didn't make it happen the way I wanted it to happen, and you took matters in your own hand. So actually this is hindsight, or this looking back into our lives. It gives us this confidence and this faith in God.
बिल्कुल ऐसा ही होता है, जैसे सूरह कहफ में भी अल्लाह ताला ने दिखाया है कि बज़ाहिर वो कुछ और हो रहा होता है, लेकिन पीछे से उसका मकसद जो है वो बेहतरी ही
Right.
होती है।
Correct.
Thank you.
you.
Iqra Bashir? Bashir, please go ahead.
Sir, my question is on the behalf of my daughter. She is 5.5 years old. She is confused about the introduction of Allah. She asks me, Allah कैसे पहले से थे? वो girl है या वो boy है? When we use the he pronoun for Allah, so she asks a girl or boy, and she says, अगर अल्लाह हमें देख सकते हैं तो हम क्यों नहीं देख सकते? She is sitting besides me, so if you can introduce her, so she can understand better.
This is one of the most difficult questions that I've come across in my life. It's really a big challenge to introduce God to young minds, especially 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds. But I think that one thing that can be done is to introduce God the way He has introduced Himself in the Quran, and that is that He says that as far as His being is concerned, we have no knowledge of His being. I mean, we don't know whether He's a he or a she, or how tall He is, or how big He is. All that we know is that we can only know God through His attributes, His qualities, that He's compassionate, that He's kind. And the best way to know God is to know your own parents. When you're a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, you can see that how your mother cares for you, how your father cares for you, how they are concerned with you. So these are the qualities that you already know from your parents. So basically, God has reflected Himself in a very tiny way in your parents. But the difference, of course, is that you can see your parents and you can know the physical being of your parents. For God, that cannot be done. So the question, of course, which is very valid, which He has asked you, is that if we don't know who God is, I mean, we cannot see Him, then why do we call Him a He? Why is He not a she or some other gender? Well, that has a lot to do with our own understanding of the genders, because we associate power and might with the male gender. We think that the male gender is more powerful and mighty and strength and has a lot of strength. So you see, human beings ended up doing so, that they started calling God by the male gender, not because He's a male, but because their own perception of God was that He has to be someone very strong. And because the male gender is normally stronger, so they ended up calling Him by the male pronoun. And this is something which happened. And later on, because there was no other way to make them understand, all divine scriptures also clung to this, and they accepted this human construct in which human beings were actually thinking that God is a male gender. So God did not change that, and He adopted the same pronoun in the Quran and in the previous books as well, because this is our human perception. So your daughter needs to know this, that this is our perception of God, not God's own perception of His own self. And secondly, if you have to know God, the best way to know God would be to look at your mother and your father, and the way they at times get angry with you, they at times love you, and at times they cuddle you. So all these things that you can see in your father and your mother basically are like diluted attributes of God. I mean, they are much more diluted, but this is how you can recognize God. Because I mean, you get angry. Why do you get angry at your children? Because you want their betterment. You not like them to fail. You make them go to school every day, in spite of the fact that they would not like to go to school every day. They would not like to get up early in the morning. So I mean, but you force them to do so. So if you just relate all this happening that's going around you through your parents to that scheme of God, you will ultimately realize that I mean, your parents themselves, who are so beneficial to you, they are actually themselves created by God. So God is someone who has created someone for the children, for young ones who are like everything for them in this young life. So I've tried to convey some of these things. I know it's difficult, and it would have been easier if I could have had eye contact with her, and that would have been something that would have made me understand whether I'm going across to her or not. But I think I've just spoken of some very general things that might make you that might make you work a little more and use these concepts to make her understand who God is.
And how can I make her understand that why can't we see Allah?
Because God has chosen himself to not be seen, because this world has been created for a trial and test. And had he been in front of us, we would not have been tried and tested, because we would have been attached to God the way angels are. You see, angels are in God's company, and their trial and test is virtually nothing, because they are always, if you're living besides God, if you're living around God, you will never do something bad, because you are not going to use your will to do something bad, because you are in the company of a supreme being who is personified as a glorious person, or as a glorious being. So he has chosen himself to not manifest himself before people, so that people at times do forget him, and that forgetfulness is a trial for us. So you see, had he been in front of us, we would never have been tested. We would have always been doing good, because we are always in his company. So when we are deprived of his company, we have the opportunity to think in our own way and to do good and bad by using our own freedom of will. Otherwise, we wouldn't have. Yes, angels do have freedom of will as well. But you see, when you are in a situation in which goodness and righteousness and everything which is beautiful is around you, the chance of using that freedom of will, although you have that in a way, but you would not use it. But when God is not before you and you have your own self, the real test is now to be reckoned with. And God has actually, you need to tell your daughter that God actually is a merciful person. He's a merciful being who has actually blessed us, or who wants to bless us with eternal life, in which we would live forever with our parents. But for that, he says that you have to earn that eternity. That time of eternity has to be earned by you by doing good deeds. And so therefore he has put you through this life so that you do good deeds, and you are once again gathered in the next life with your parents forever and forever.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Ammar Rasul, please go ahead. Ammar
Thank you very
Rasul.
much. Assalamu alaikum. Yes. Dr. Sahab, my question was, is Islam concerned at all with the gaining of political power by Muslims or prophets or communities, or is it only concerned with individual salvation? And why I ask this question is because even in the lives of the different prophets, for example, our prophet, his ministry became more successful when he did gain some sort of political power, even if it was only on one city in the beginning and then all over Arabia. But in other cases where prophets did not have any political power, they were preaching the word of God for hundreds of years, but yet they had a handful of followers. So is Islam concerned with the gaining of political power to be able to spread the message in a more effective way?
So you see, you have to differentiate between prophets of God and, in fact, those prophets who became messengers of God. So this is a difference which the Quran also makes between a Nabi and a Rasul. I'm going to come back to that in a while. Between prophets of God and messengers, and between people like us who are not deputed by God for any such task. For messengers of God, the Almighty says that He is going to create smaller days of judgment on the face of the earth in their lifetime, in the lifetime of these messengers, by giving them ascendancy, by giving them power. Either that power would be manifested through God's own actions, and for example, the elements of nature would be used by him to destroy their enemies through cyclones and through various other natural disasters, or they will be given the power, like in the case of Moses, like in the case of Prophet Muhammad, and then their enemies would be left at their mercy. But in that case, you see, this is the plan of God, that He is going to create smaller days of judgment in the life of every messenger of God, in order to make it manifest to people like us who are living in the post-messenger era or the post-prophetic era, when messengers don't come, that just as these nations of God were reckoned with in this world, they were punished or rewarded in this world, our reward and punishment is also going to take place in the hereafter. So this is one thing that we have to understand, that the dynamics of messengers of God and prophets is different from the dynamics that we are going through. For them, God creates a plan in which this world is to ultimately, in their own times, like their own times, for example, 40, 50, 100 years, whatever the time, or whatever the age of that messenger is, that he has to create a certain result. And that result is that the enemies of God have to be punished and his friends are rewarded. So at times this punishment takes place through, as I said, natural disasters, and at times through the hands of the of the believers. And whenever this happens in the hands of the believers, then that can only happen when they are given political power, because no group which does not hold or yield political power has the authority to punish people. So that is a given. Now, as far as people like us are concerned, of course, because of the fact that we have different capacities, I am an individual, I could be a lawyer, I could be a judge, I could be a teacher, and I could be a person who ends up in the parliament. So you see, Islam addresses an individual in all respects, but that individual can have different capacities. He has a collective capacity if he is a member of the parliament, and he could have a non-collective capacity. He was an ordinary person who's just teaching or just lecturing, or maybe he's a judge or a lawyer or whatever. So what Islam does is that it addresses every person in his or her individual capacity. But that person himself or herself could be a person who is representing a collectivity. As I said, he could be a member of the parliament. In that case, he would be required to fulfill all those directives which a person who is at the helm of affairs is required to fulfill. So in this way, you may understand that for us, it is the question of who we are. If I am a person who is an individual who is not part of the government, then I have directives which relate to me as an individual. But if I am a part of a government, then there are certain things which Islam tells a polity to do. For example, it tells them that their government should be based on the will of the people. It tells them that they have the right to exact zakat or the collective charity from people so that they can run the state. So you see, for them, there are these directives. Now, the question, of course, that might arise as a result is that should we work for that end, that we should create a political situation in which Muslims should rule certain countries or implement religion? This is something where Islam has not interfered at all. And this question of imposition of religion, for example, we know that there are religious groups who, for example, if I can even name them, Jamaat Islami in Pakistan or Dr. Ahmed's Tanzeem Islami, they all have this objective of implementing or imposing Islam either through the ballot or through a revolution. So in that case, they give religious background to their reasoning, and they say that there are certain verses of the Quran which tell us that we must implement Islam collectively if it is not already implemented. And the verses that they use, of course, are the ones that generally relate to prophets of God. So in a nutshell, I can say the prophets of God and messengers have a different dynamics through which they are governed. For us, it's a different dynamic. We are addressees of religion in all our capacities. If I am a person who's a government official or belongs to the government, I will be an addressee of all those collective directives. So this is the main thing. But the third thing which I said is that if I think that I am responsible also for creating an Islamic political system or an Islamic government or an Islamic state, then this is something in which the Quran has not at all burdened us with this responsibility. It's not said that you should create an Islamic, you should implement Islam in this way, that you create a party and that party, for example, thinks that it's a religious duty of people to work to this end. So I've tried to simplify it if you have any questions.
Dr. Saab, a very quick follow-up question on the same topic is that this Qiyamut-e-Sughra or this concept of Qiyamut-e-Sughra is very difficult or almost impossible to see in the case of Hazrat Isa. Like in his story or in his case, what shape did this Qiyamut-e-Sughra take? Who implemented this and on whom was it exactly?
If you have studied the Bible, you'll understand that it was implemented just about 20 years after Jesus' death and Titus, the Roman emperor, he destroyed the people who had denied Jesus, and the Romans were destroyed. So and the Jews also, they because of course we know that he was the last Jew, he was the last Jewish prophet. So the punishment or the denuna that you're talking about, or the worldly judgment of Jesus is concerned, it took place just about 15-20 years. And you know that in the Bible, the book of John, the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Matthew, you'll find these words of Jesus, that he has said that this generation is not going to pass. I mean, which is referring to the fact that people who are living at my time, that this punishment is not going to pass, I mean, as long as these people are living, implying the fact that it is going to take place in their own lives. So Jesus himself predicted that his enemies would be taken to task, and he said that this generation, which I'm speaking to, I mean, the heavens and the earth might pass, I mean, they might be destroyed, but these people will not be left living. So this is something that he himself predicted, and lo and behold, it took place just about 20 years after he passed away.
बहुत शुक्रिया जी. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Since we're running out of time, please, for the remaining participants, try to keep your questions concise. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
डॉक्टर शहजाद, मेरा ये सवाल है कि you believe in Allah, पर मुझे कई दफा ये होता है कि when you can see a person, you can talk to the person, you can ask forgiveness of the person, it is more effective. Or if the person speaks to you face to face, it sorts of convinces you more. तो मेरे साथ कई दफा ये होता है, I read the Quran, I read the instructions, but many times I feel that I wish if Allah could I could see Allah, Allah could speak to me, I could ask Allah, I could beg forgiveness, or I could get answers. How does one go about it when you don't see Allah? You believe in Allah, you believe in the Quran. I'm not talking about you, but I'm talking about myself. Sometimes I find it a little difficult. How should one go about this?
I think that we have to understand the scheme of God for this. So see, the scheme of God was or is that he has not chosen to reveal himself in his physical form. He has chosen to keep himself concealed for the purpose of trial and test. And the thing that you're experiencing is experienced by all of us, because see, we are not in God's presence. So we have that affinity towards him. We would like to talk to him, we would like to speak to him, we would like to have his answers. But he says that, well, if that is going to take place, then for that you have to win over him by actually doing good deeds, and ultimately in heaven, in the hereafter, you'll be able to do all these things. You will be able to talk to him, confide in him, maybe even crack jokes with him. But the thing is that God says that you have to win that situation for you, that it's like a coveted post that you have to work for. And for that, he has said that there is a temporary period of time, which is like a 60 or 100-year time, in which you have to work hard to get to that place. So it's like God telling us that whatever you wish is possible. Yes, you will be granted your wishes, but then you have to earn it. And to earn it, I'm not going to show myself to you, but I am going to put you through circumstances in which you have to fight these circumstances and be patient and be grateful and be rewarded. And if you are rewarded, and if you really prove your mettle, then what will happen is that whatever you are now wishing would be granted to you in the next world.
Dr. Shehzad, like I see you talking, it convinces me more. If I didn't see your picture, you understand what I'm trying to say. कि आप किसी को देख नहीं सकते, but you believe everything you're told by that person. That is the sort of.
So you see, in that case, you see, the Almighty sent his messengers who spoke on his behalf, and once these messengers left, they left a book called the Qur'an, which was God's representative on earth. So you see, although you cannot talk to God, but you can know what he requires from us. So it's not a win-win situation. It's not like 100% thing that we would like. But you see, as I said, God says that if you would like to talk to me and be face to face with me, then you must earn this position. And to earn that position, I have sent my messengers, and I have sent a book which is preserved the way I would have wanted you to know it. It is there for you, so you only need to follow it and understand it, and you'll get what you want. It's just a question of those 60 or 70 years of that toil that you have to go through, and you will win that position.
Okay, thank you very much. But kabhi kabhi ye hota hai mere saath, not always, but sometimes.
I think all of us, it's not just with you, all of us have this yearning to be with God and to see Him. But as I said, this is something which God says it will be granted to you, but you have to work for it. You have to win this honor.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Ms. Tirmizi Ahmed, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. My question to you was that at the time of Jesus, if I'm correct, we believe he was born a Jew, and then it was the Jews who tried to ostracize him because he had brought in a new religion, and with the Romans, they eventually ended up killing him. Why is it that Muslims are hated so much and they had nothing to do with it? By the Jews, by the Christians, by the Hindus. It almost seems like out of the 8 billion that exist on the planet, it's everybody else on one side and Muslims on the other. It is very hard to sometimes, explain to the self and explain to children. Is there some directive in the Quran that says that it will always be like this?
It's like understanding that you must not understand Islam or what God says or what the Quran says from the actions of a handful of Muslims. You see, in the last couple of decades, because of terrorism, because of these acts in which you end up killing people, innocent people, people have distanced themselves from Islam a lot. And one of the reasons for that is that erroneous perception of these Quranic verses, which people think that actually are telling them to, for example, kill non-Muslims or not be friends with them. So basically, although these are a handful of Muslims, but because of the fact that when you blow up a church or when you do something of this nature, you catch the headlines and you tend to become representatives, wrong ambassadors, I would say, of people who in their majority would not subscribe to them. I mean, they would not condone what's going on. But as I said, because of the fact that you create that havoc in a particular place, you become prominent. So the reason that Muslims have become so hateful and this phenomenon of Islamophobia is spreading fast is because of some religious people thinking that what they are doing is in line with the Quran, whereas it's not in line with the Quran. For example, Abu Bakr Baghdadi in Nigeria, in certain African countries, we know how they have killed people, they have abducted innocent girls from colleges, and in Afghanistan today we know that girls have no say. I mean, they cannot. There's no education for them, and they cannot participate in any collective activity. They have to stay at their homes, and their own agenda, if you look at their own agenda, is that they have to conquer the rest of the world, and it's just a question of time. They just need to gather enough strength. So you see, this is how their worldview is building up, and this is something which catches the eye of everyone. And the error which other people make is that they think that what they are doing is representing every single Muslim's worldview, which is of course not the right thing. It's unfair. But this is how the world is, that they pick and choose, they cherry pick their own audience and then give a verdict. So this is how I see it. I think that we are giving that wrong impression, but remember, the we is just about 5 or maybe 2% of the rest of the 98%. But because of the rest of the 98% people are the silent majority, they are people who are, they don't say anything. Yes, if you ask them, they'll say that this is wrong, but the vocal minority has taken the better of the silent majority.
So, out of the 30 odd countries that are Muslim, most of them are either run by, autocrats, or there's some kind of, there's no democracy anywhere. Why is that Islam has taken such an important, of what Quranic verses were that were able to influence these people and make them believe that politics in Islam is supposed to be the same and they're supposed to run their countries, while in Christianity or in Hinduism or in, why is it that these people have been able to keep politics and their religion separate and we haven't? And because of that, we've created such a chaotic world.
If you look at the Christian world, very earlier on, right after some very close to proximity when Jesus had passed away, Saint Paul took the reins of Christianity in his own hands, and he actually abrogated the Sharia and all the directives of the Torah, which are very similar to the Quran. And then later on, after the Enlightenment, I mean, I'm just skipping a lot of centuries, we know that this secularism took the better of them, and they said that religion and politics must be separated, and they confined the religion to the churches, and they said that as far as the business of the state is concerned, we will do our own, I mean, whatever we think is right, we'll not take any divine guidance. So these two steps, one at the very beginning of the Christian kingdom and one much later, they accounted for the fact that things went differently. But even in that time, if you look at the Crusades, I mean, this is about, let's say, 800 years ago, you'll find the Christians actually conquering Jerusalem and persecuting the Jews and killing them in heaps, and also Muslims. That is something which was there, but they actually then, as I said, took a different turn, and they said that, well, we have to separate the church from the state. And as a result, I mean, they are now pursuing a different line. But as far as the Muslims are concerned, as I said, because they think that they are following the life of the Prophet or the example of the Prophet or other prophets of God who were told to kill disbelievers if they insisted on their disbelief. And they think that this is something that is now automatically transferred to them after the prophets have passed away, which is, of course, an erroneous perception. I have given talks on this on several occasions that we don't understand this. But because they think that they are equal addressees of this directive, they have taken up this task on their own selves, and this is what is happening now.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have time for just one more question. So, Saima Khan, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is that not believing on evil eye, is it something against Islam? Because when I tell my friends that I don't believe and I believe on the Quranic verse, like even a leaf couldn't fall without Allah's wish and will, and if something bad happens, 95% it's our fault or something wrong is done by us. Is it okay? Because they said that like you're denying lots of hadith on this.
I mean, you see, this is something which the Prophet has said, and I find it to be quite true. But I mean, even in those 95% areas in which you can have a logic, of course, there is some logic behind it. But then there are that 1 or 2% areas in which you are not able to explain, and there are these effects that people experience. And I think there's no reason to deny it. Unless, I mean, you have some strong proof. I mean, in the presence of God, God's Prophet saying, so his words are, let me recall them, he says, Al-Ainul Haq, something to that effect, which means that evil eye is a reality that can take place. I think he was referring to psychological ailments which do get the better of us, and at times these psychological ailments, they have their negative effects and impacts. And for that matter, even if you think that there are ailments which have no remedy, I mean, the only answer again is the same that I gave earlier on, that you give yourself in God's protection and you say, well, I'm not understanding what's happening with me, and I've ruled out all physical causes, and I still feel bad, or I still feel that something is wrong. And so God, Auzu bi Rabbil Falak, Auzu bi Rabbin Nas, I give myself in your protection. So that is still what you would do. So even if you don't do that, I mean, from a believer's standpoint, when you don't understand certain things which are happening, what else can we do but to say that, well, we give ourselves in God's protection?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was all the time we had for the questions today. So for the remaining questions, I would request the participants to wait until the next Islam Study Circle, or wait until the next session of Ask Dr. Saleem, which is held the first Saturday.
Yes, and we also allot a certain portion of the time in our textual study from last week. We've started that. We do allocate a certain amount of time for general questions, even in our textual study class every Sunday.
Thank you for that reminder, Dr. Saleem. And that was it for today. Inshallah, see you tomorrow in another session of textual study of the Qur'an. And until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.